Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes from the subreddit 2XChromosomes, posted by user sweet-opportunity111. The post is a linked post titled, "Women in India are reportedly having their uteruses removed just to survive the sugarcane industry. I wish I was exaggerating." Underneath the link for the article, I read, "Every now and then, I come across a story that makes me question what we've collectively decided is an acceptable cost of, quote, economic growth, end quote." This was one of them. In parts of India, female sugarcane workers have reportedly been pushed toward hysterectomies, not because they needed the surgery, but because menstruation is treated as a disruption to productivity. Missing work means losing wages. There are few sanitation facilities in the fields, relentless production targets, debt, and labor contractors who allegedly see a woman's natural bodily functions as an inconvenience. So the solution becomes removing the uterus. Read that again. A life-altering surgery with permanent consequences becomes easier than guaranteeing workers a few days of dignity, access to toilets, or basic labor protections. And the most infuriating part is that many of these women are from economically vulnerable backgrounds. When survival depends on daily wages, quote, choice, end quote, becomes a deeply misleading word. If your options are to undergo a major surgery or risk your family's livelihood, are you really choosing? People often imagine labor exploitation as long hours or low pay, but this is exploitation reaching inside a woman's body and turning it into another site of economic control. This isn't just a woman's issue, it's a labor rights and human rights issue. It's what happens when poverty, gender inequality, and unregulated labor systems collide. As an Indian, I'm angry, not because this reflects poorly on my country, but because these women deserve better than to have their pain disappear into statistics and investigative reports that most of the world will never read. The least I can do is make more people aware that this is happening, because no one should have to sacrifice an organ to keep a job." Here ends the written post. As of recording, this has almost 4,000 upvotes and 170 comments. Couple comments to feature here before I go into the article. User Andrusella commented, "When I first read the headline, I thought the women were doing it voluntarily to protect themselves from unwanted pregnancies due to things happening against their will. This is worse." User Sexy Flying commented saying, "Yet at the same time, India is, quote, worried, end quote, about a declining birth rate." Thinking emoji. This is horrific abuse based off of the worker's gender. And this, I agree with the original poster, is labor exploitation of the worst kind. It is not only the indignity of not having enough resources out in the fields to be able to support the workers when they do go through menstruation. It is also them being forced to make the choice of sacrificing their uterus or sacrificing days of pay. Because as the article points out, these women are contractors and they do not have the same protections as actual employees, whatever few protections they are given in India. From the British Safety Council, I read, article titled, "A Bitter Harvest. Female sugarcane workers, quote, pushed, unquote, into having hysterectomies." Written by Orchi Bandyopadi on 11th August 2025. The practice of female sugarcane workers in Maharashtra state undergoing unnecessary hysterectomies, in part driven by a financial need to avoid sick days due to menstrual problems and pregnancy, still persists, allege campaigners, despite a state government commissioned report in 2019 urging greater action to eradicate it. A growing scandal has emerged in Maharashtra's Bid district, one of the major suppliers of female laborers to sugarcane farms in the states of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh in recent months and years. Side note, please excuse any mispronunciation I may have encountered. Continuing on, in the last decade, thousands of women in the district of Bede have reportedly undergone hysterectomies, driven by factors such as a personal need to avoid pregnancy and common health issues, such as painful periods, in order to continue working to earn money. Unscrupulous labor contractors encouraging female workers to undergo the procedure by offering loans to pay for it, and unscrupulous medical professionals in private clinics advising unnecessary hysterectomies to boost their income. In fact, a recently published official health department report, linked here, revealed that in late 2024, 843 women from Bede allegedly underwent hysterectomies before migrating for seasonal agricultural work in India's sugarcane harvesting areas. Shockingly, 477 were between the ages of 30 and 35, an unusual age to undergo the procedure, which involves the removal of the uterus. The issue first came to public attention in 2019 after an inquiry commissioned by the Maharashtra government, following pressure from workers and women's rights campaigners, found that out of 82,309 women sugarcane workers surveyed in Bede, about 13,861 of them, parentheses nearly 17%, end parentheses, had undergone hysterectomies. The inquiry, led by the deputy chairperson of the Maharashtra Legislative Council, Dr. Neelam Gaur, also found that the rate of hysterectomies among women from Bede was 36% compared with a national average of 3%. However, campaigners believe the actual numbers and percentages of women from locations like Bede that have undergone, I believe I meant to write undergone, often unnecessary hysterectomies could be much higher. Section: Number of factors. Activists say there are a number of factors driving the high rate of hysterectomies among the sugarcane workers, with many of the procedures seemingly having been carried out without any genuine medical grounds or reasons. Sugarcane cutters are generally hired in pairs, popularly known as jodis, comprising of a husband and a wife. And jodis are expected to cut 2 to 3 tons of cane in a day. They are typically hired and paid by middlemen, known as, quote, mukaddams, end quote, who receive a commission from the sugar factories, ranging from 15 to 25% of the amount for which a married couple is hired. Workers are usually given a lump sum wage advance by the mukaddam of around rupees 1 to 1.5 lakh for the 6-month harvesting season. Side note, again, my apologies for my mispronunciations. Continuing on, and then work for the agreed period to, quote, pay off, end quote, the advance. However, the workers are not entitled to sick leave or sick pay during the harvesting period, partly because the mukaddam insist on workers completing all the prepaid workdays, and also because of lax enforcement by local authorities of labor laws covering rights to minimum wages, sick leave, and sick pay. As a result, if workers take time off, for example, because of pregnancy, miscarriage, period pains, gynecological problems such as uterine cysts, or to attend medical appointments, they must compensate the contractor. Although the workers can earn around 250 to 300 rupees per day, if they take time off, whether a half or full day, they face fines from the contractor varying from 500 rupees to 1,000 rupees per day, which is much higher than their equivalent daily earnings. The sugar mill owners have no involvement in the payment of wages and argue that the employment relationship is between the mukaddams and the workers. However, campaigners say this allows the mukaddams to levy the unfair penalties for work absence, demanding the payment of unreasonable fines. At the same time, if the work comes to an end before the agreed contract period due to low sugarcane production levels, the workers have to return part of the advance to the mukaddams. However, if workers are unable to pay any penalties levied for sickness of absence or repay sums owed because the contract has ended early, they are often held in, quote, debt bondage, end quote, required to carry out other work for the mukaddam until the debt is repaid. Debts are sometimes also carried over to the following year, when the workers are forced to return for the subsequent year's harvest and spend a portion of the time during the following year's harvest working to repay the previous year's debts. Campaigners say that as a result, when female workers develop gynecological problems, they feel discouraged from taking time off to seek medical help. Also, workers usually lack the money to pay for medical care for gynecological issues and problems like urinary tract infections, and borrowing money from the mukaddams is often the only option to raise the necessary funds. As a result, female workers are often tempted to undergo non-essential hysterectomies to address these kinds of health issues, as this avoids the loss of wages from sickness, absence, and the need to borrow money to pay for ongoing medical care for common gynecological problems that can often be treated without the need for the drastic option of a hysterectomy. Section: Strenuous work. The strenuous nature of the work, with female workers gathering, carrying, and lifting large sacks of cane, and the long working hours and poor living conditions, means that female workers are more prone to aches and pains, including problems like period pains. The sugarcane workers also often lack access to hygienic toilets, clean water, and menstrual hygiene aids, which increases the risk of infection. All of these factors increase the risk of gynecological problems and health conditions like urinary tract infections. In addition, workers who already have had children sometimes face pressure from their husbands and families, whom they often send some of their wages, to undergo a hysterectomy in order to avoid future pregnancies that could prevent them working in the sugarcane fields, despite there being no medical need for the procedure and them sometimes being of a relatively young age. Activists also say the mukaddams often pressure female workers into undergoing hysterectomies to ensure they are able to continue working. By avoiding pregnancy and menstrual problems, they offer loans to pay for the surgery, which further traps the women in debt and forces them to continue working to repay the sums borrowed. Reports suggest hysterectomy surgery from a private doctor costs anything between 25,000 rupees and 30,000 rupees, which the women must then repay by working for the contractor. There are also reports of unscrupulous private doctors and medical practices encouraging female sugarcane workers to undergo unnecessary hysterectomies in order to boost their income. Campaigners say they have uncovered evidence of women seeking medical assistance for gynecological problems such as uterine cysts, where private doctors have erroneously told the women they were at immediate risk of cancer and urged them to undergo a hysterectomy, which the women then agreed to pay for, fearing for their lives. Media reports suggest that in most towns and villages in Bede district, one woman per household has had a hysterectomy. Section: Health problems. However, reputable doctors warn that the removal of a woman's uterus, especially under the age of 40, can increase the risk of short and long-term health problems. The short-term problems include abdominal pain, and the woman may also develop urinary incontinence and suffer pelvic floor prolapses. When hysterectomy also involves removal of the ovaries, this can trigger early menopause, raising the risk of serious health problems like heart disease, effectively shortening the woman's life expectancy. Reflecting on her own experience, Savita, a farmer and mother of two, says she was only 28 when she underwent a hysterectomy. Quote, "It's about survival," unquote, she explains. Quote, "I started working in the sugarcane fields after marriage. Although my family owns a small plot of land, water scarcity has made cultivation impossible." Quote, "There were days when we had to go hungry to bed or survive on one jowar roti and pickle. Then I started working as a sugarcane cutter with my husband. I opted for a hysterectomy because I needed to work long hours and earn. My husband also supported my decision because period pain affected my work. Also, mukaddams usually don't hire menstruating women as they believe that women may end up taking frequent breaks while cutting sugarcane." Savita, who is now 35, adds that after the procedure she did gain weight. Quote, "But I was more productive in the field and was able to haul heavy bundles of crop with no worries of any menstruation or pregnancy." End quote. Section: Seasonal migration. In the district of Bede, many small and marginal farmers and their families migrate to the sugar belt of western Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, and some parts of Andhra Pradesh to work as sugarcane cutters and earn money during the harvesting season. In fact, Bede is the region of Maharashtra state where the largest number of sugarcane workers normally reside and migrate from in search of work. Out of the estimated 1 million sugarcane cutters in the state of Maharashtra, approximately half of them are thought to come from Bede. The primary reason for the annual seasonal migration is the persistent drought-like situation in the Bede region, combined with the underdevelopment of the area's farm sector. As a result, smallholder farms, who form a large part of the agricultural sector in Bede, often require help to deal with water scarcity, climate change, and fragmented land holdings. This limits their ability to provide for their families and secure profitable harvests, driving them to migrate to the sugarcane fields. Quote, despite having pieces of land, farmers are unable to cultivate anything due to a lack of development of the agriculture sector, end quote, explains Dr. Bharat Pantakar, co-founder of Shramik Mukti Dal, a political organization that seeks to organize farmers, agricultural laborers, and people evicted from their land for dam building projects to protest against the impact on their lives and livelihoods from problems like drought and land evictions for dam construction. Quote, alternative employment is also missing, and that compounds the problem, end quote. Patankar adds that impoverished communities such as the Banjara and Vanjari tribes account for a substantial majority of the sugarcane cutting workers in Maharashtra state. A sugarcane cutter's job during the harvest season, which is between October and March, involves cutting, collecting, and bundling cane. A typical workday begins at 4 a.m. and stretches till 7 p.m., with only a 1-hour break for lunch. Once cut and collected, the heavy cane bundles, weighing 30 to 40 kilograms, are carried by workers on their heads and loaded onto tractors or trucks for transport. Workers are required to climb makeshift steps propped against the trucks to load the material, while carrying the cane bundles on their heads. This is particularly risky for women, given they generally lack the physical strength of men. Accidents and injuries are common, as the ground below is slippery, uneven, and littered with sharp objects or insects, posing a risk to worker safety. Section: Profitable crop. Sugarcane is one of the most profitable cash crops for farmers across large parts of India, and this has driven chronic overcultivation. In 2021 to 2022, India surpassed Brazil to become the largest sugar producer in the world, producing 35.9 million tons, an all-time high. However, campaigners argue the industry is having a devastating impact on the migrant workers and their families. For example, because weak enforcement of labor laws means contractors can refuse to pay sick leave and demand fines from workers for sickness absence, which is driving women with menstrual and gynecological problems to needlessly seek hysterectomies. In the sugarcane fields, the laborers from Bede live in makeshift shelters with no sanitation facilities. According to a report by Oxfam India, quote, the tents are small and inadequate to give complete shelter, end quote, and, quote, do not have water, electricity, supply, or toilets, end quote. Campaigners add that sugarcane cultivation is an extremely water-intensive process, meaning scarce groundwater supplies are being diverted for crop irrigation, rather than essential use by the population. Section: Lack of progress. The 2019 report from Dr. Neelam Gaur, commissioned by the Maharashtra government, contained a number of recommendations aimed at eradicating the practice where female agricultural laborers from Bede and other areas are encouraged or coerced into unnecessary hysterectomies by family, sugarcane labor contractors, and unscrupulous doctors. The recommendations, which were made to the state's health minister and the state's sugar regulator, include ensuring sugarcane harvesting workers in Maharashtra are provided with suitable toilets and clean running water to ensure the female workers can achieve better personal sanitary and menstrual hygiene care, and ensuring workers receive minimum wages. However, activists say progress in ensuring the provision of welfare and sanitary facilities for female workers on the sugarcane farms and stepping up enforcement action to ensure labor contractors are complying with minimum wage laws has been painfully slow. Gaur's report also led to the development of medical guidelines for hysterectomies in the Maharashtra state, under which private hospitals and clinics must seek approval from public hospitals before conducting these procedures to ensure there are genuine clinic grounds for the operation. However, while the number of hysterectomies carried out in the state in recent years has reportedly fallen, suggesting the measure is in part having the desired effect, there is evidence suggesting some smaller private clinics continue to encourage unnecessary hysterectomies, either due to financial greed or inadequate medical knowledge. Workers' rights activists are therefore calling on the Union and Maharashtra governments to take stronger action to prevent exploitation of both male and female sugarcane workers by unscrupulous labor contractors and medical professionals. They are calling for improvements to working conditions and labor rights and further action to eliminate the practice of female workers feeling the need to seek or being pressurized into undergoing often unnecessary hysterectomies. Side note. This is an area where their government desperately needs to step in and shore up these rights. As this article states, this cannot be overstated. There needs to be government protections in place in order to guarantee the workers that their rights are valuable, that their rights are theirs, and no corporation can stomp all over them. In particular, they want to see improved regulation of the activities of the sugar labor contractors, such as stronger enforcement of minimum wage laws, stopping contractors, levying fines on workers for sickness absence, and ensuring workers are provided with sick pay, all of which would, in theory, reduce the financial pressure on female workers to undergo hysterectomies. Sorry, I believe they meant to say undergo hysterectomies. Continuing on. They also want to see greater oversight and inspections of private medical clinics to ensure hysterectomies are only carried out when there is a genuine medical need. Referring to the recently released official report suggesting that large numbers of female sugarcane workers from Bede allegedly underwent hysterectomies in late 2024, an activist warned, quote, "The latest data has reignited urgent calls for regulatory oversight, improved public health care, and stronger protections for women in the informal workforce," unquote. For more information on the Shramik Mukti Dal, or the organization working to rally the farmers and the other people working with the sugarcane workers against the sugarcane planters and companies. First, here is this Wikipedia article. To follow them and to stay up to date on what they're up to, here is their Facebook page. Please consider supporting their efforts and liking and sharing all of their content to share it around the world so that they get more traction. Workers' rights are for everyone, regardless of nation and regardless of job. Thank you for watching/listening, and I will see you in the next one.